Am I boring you with all this? No? Good. Well, you see, Max, I'm finding myself in a rather awkward position. You've only got to read this note to understand. It's from Rebecca. And what's more, she had the foresight to put a date on it. She wrote it to me the day she died. Incidentally, I was out on a party on that night, so I didn't get it until the next day.
And what makes you think that note would interest me?
Oh, I'm not going to bother you with the contents now, but I can assure you that it is not the note of a woman who intends to drown herself that same night. By the way, what do you do with old bones? Bury them, eh, what? However, for the time being... You know, Max, I'm getting awfully fed up with my job as a motor car salesman. I don't know if you've ever experienced the feeling of driving an expensive motor car that isn't your own, but it can be very, very exasperating. You know what I mean. You want to own the car yourself. I've often wondered what it'd be like to retire to the country, have a nice little place with a few acres of shooting. I've never figured out what it would cost a year, but I'd like to talk about it with you. I'd like to have your advice on how to live comfortably without hard work.
Hello, Favell. Are you looking for me, Maxim? Yes. Mr. Favell and I have a little business transaction on hand. I think we had better conduct it over at the inn. They may have a private room there.
Well, see you later.
Find Colonel Julyan. Tell him I want to see him immediately. Come on, Favell, let's go. Have you a private room, please?
Of course, sir. Through there, sir. Hope this will do, Mr. De Winter.
Oh, splendid. Splendid. Exactly like the Ritz.
Any orders, gents?
Yes, you might bring me a large brandy and soda. How about you, Max? Have one on me. I feel I can afford to play host.
Thanks, I don't mind if I do.
Make it two, will you, like a good fellow?
Very good, sir.
Where's Mr. De Winter?
Through the other door, sir.
Colonel Julyan, this is Mr. Favell.
Oh, I know Colonel Julyan. We're old friends, aren't we?
Since you're old friends, I assume you also know he's head of the police here. I think he might be interested to hear your proposition. Go on, tell him all about it.
I don't know what you mean. I merely said I hope to give up selling cars and retire into the country.
Actually, he offered to withhold a vital piece of evidence from the inquest if I made it worth his while.
I only want to see justice done, Colonel. Now, that boat builder's evidence suggested certain possible theories concerning Rebecca's death. One of them, of course, is suicide. Now, I have a little note here which I consider puts that possibility quite out of court. Read it, Colonel.
Jack, darling, I've just seen the doctor and I'm going down to Mandalay right away. I shall be at the cottage all this evening and shall leave the door open for you. I have something terribly important to tell you. Rebecca.
Now, does that look like the note of a woman who had made up her mind to kill herself? And apart from that, Colonel, do you mean to tell me that if you wanted to commit suicide, you'd go to all the trouble of putting out to sea in a boat and then take a hammer and chisel and laboriously knock holes through the bottom of it? Come, Colonel, as an officer of the law, don't you feel there are some slight grounds for suspicion?
Of murder?
What else? You've known Max a long time, so you know he's the old-fashioned type, who'd die to defend his honor, or who'd kill for it.
It's blackmail, pure and simple.
Yes, blackmail is not so pure, nor so simple. It can bring a lot of trouble to a great many people. And the blackmailer sometimes finds himself in jail at the end of it.
Oh, I see. You're going to hold De Winter's hand through all this. Just because he's the big noise around here, and he's actually permitted you to dine with him.
Be careful, Favell. You brought an accusation of murder. Have you any witnesses?
Oh, I do have a witness.
Oh.
It's that fellow Ben. That stupid coroner hadn't been as much of a snob as you are. He'd have seen that half-wit was hiding something.
And why should Ben do that?
Because we caught him once, Rebecca and I, peering at us through the cottage window. Rebecca threatened him with the asylum. That's why he was afraid to speak, but he was always hanging about. He must have seen this whole thing.
It's ridiculous even listening to all this.
You're like a little trades union, all of you, aren't you? And if my guess is right, Crawley, there's a bit of malice in your soul toward me, isn't there? Crawley didn't have much success with Rebecca, but he ought to have more luck this time. And the bride will be grateful for your fraternal arm, Crawley, in a week or so. Every time she faints, in fact.
De Winter!
Maxim, please.
That temper of yours will do you in yet, Max.
Excuse me, gentlemen. Now, is there anything else?
Yes. You might bring Mr. De Winter a sedative.
No, nothing at all. Just leave us.
Very good.
Now, Favell, let's get this business over. As you seem to have worked out the whole thing so carefully, perhaps you can provide us also with a motive.
Ah, I knew you were going to bring that up, Colonel. I've read enough detective stories to know that there must always be a motive. And if you'll all excuse me a moment, I'll supply that too.
I wish you'd go home. You ought not to be here through all this.
Please let me stay, Maxim.
Surely, Colonel Julyan, you're not going to allow this fellow to...
My opinion of Favell is no higher than yours, Crawley. But in my official capacity, I have no alternative but to pursue his accusation.
I entirely agree with you, Colonel. In a matter so serious as this, we must make sure of every point, explore every avenue, and, in fact, if I may coin a phrase, leave no stone unturned. Ah, here she is, the missing link, the witness who will help supply the motive. Colonel Julyan and Mrs. Danvers, I believe you know everyone else.
Won't you sit down?
No offense, Colonel, but I think I'll put this to Danny. She'll understand it more easily. Danny, who was Rebecca's doctor?
Mrs. De Winter always had Dr. McLean from the village.
Now, you heard. I said Rebecca's doctor in London.
I don't know anything about that.
Oh, don't give me that, Danny. You knew everything about Rebecca. You knew she was in love with me, didn't you? Surely you haven't forgotten the good times she and I used to have down at the cottage on the beach.
She had a right to amuse herself, didn't she? Love was a game to her, only a game. It made her laugh, I tell you. She used to sit in her bed and rock with laughter at the lot of you.
Can you think of any reason why Mrs. De Winter should have taken her own life?
No, I refuse to believe it. I knew everything about her and I won't believe it.
There, you see, it's impossible. She knows that as well as I do. Now, listen to me, Danny. We know that Rebecca went to a doctor in London on the last day of her life. Who was it?
I don't know.
Oh, I understand, Danny. You think we're asking you to reveal secrets of Rebecca's life. You're trying to defend her, but that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to clear her name of the suspicion of suicide.
Mrs. Danvers, it has been suggested that Mrs. De Winter was deliberately murdered.
There you have it in a nutshell, Danny. But there's one more thing you'll want to know. The name of the murderer. It's a lovely name that rolls off the tongue so easily. George Fortescue Maximilian De Winter.
He was a doctor. Mrs. De Winter sometimes went to him privately. She used to go to him even before she was married.
We don't want reminiscences, Danny. What was his name?
Dr. Baker, 165 Gold Hawk Road, Shepherd's Bush.
There you are, Colonel. There's where you'll find your motive. Go and question Dr. Baker. He'll tell you why Rebecca went to him, to confirm the fact that she was going to have a child. A sweet, curly-headed little child.
It isn't true. It isn't true. She would have told me.
She told Max about it. Max knew he wasn't the father, so like the gentleman of the old school that he is, he killed her.
I'm afraid we shall have to question this, Dr. Baker.
Here. But for safety's sake, I think I'd like to go along, too.
Yes, unfortunately, I suppose you have the right to ask that. I'll see the coroner and have the inquest postponed pending further evidence.
I say, aren't you rather afraid that the prisoner, shall we say, might bolt?
You have my word for it that he will not do that.
Toodaloo, Max. Come along, Danny. Let's leave the unhappy couple to spend their last moments together alone.
Are you sure you don't want me to go with you, Max?
No, darling, it'll be very tiring for you. I'll be back the very first thing in the morning, and I won't even stop to sleep.
I'll be waiting for you.
Ready, Maxim?
Yes.
You two go on ahead. I'll follow with Favell. Dr. Baker, you may have seen Mr. De Winter's name in the papers recently.
Oh, yes, in connection with the body that was found in a boat. My wife was reading all about it. A very sad case. My condolences.
No, this is going to take hours. Let me...
Don't bother, Favell. I think I can tell Dr. Baker. We're trying to discover certain facts concerning the late Mrs. De Winter's activities on the day of her death. October the 12th last year. And I want you to tell me, if you can, if anyone of that name paid you a visit on that date.
I'm awfully sorry. I'm afraid I can't help you. I should have remembered the name De Winter. I've never attended a Mrs. De Winter in my life.
Well, how can you possibly tell all your patients' names?
I can look it up in my engagement diary, if you like. Did you say the 12th of October?
Yes.
Here we are. No De Winter.